Have you said something to your child that you wish you could take back? Maybe you said something that was hurtful to the child and you don't realize it. Do you wonder why your child doesn't listen? Today on The Father Show, we'll be talking about how fathers can communicate effectively with their child. And our guest today is Dr. Denny Coates, who writes and speaks about parent child communication and adolescent brain development. He is the author of several books and hundreds of articles on the topic of parenting. His focus is to provide science based resources to help parents bond with their child while encouraging their child to become happy, successful, independent adults. Hey, you don't want to miss this. Stay tuned. Well, thank you for joining us today, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to have a great time today. And I want to thank you for tuning in to the Father Show. And I'm your host, Mike Thompson. And we're going to be having a great time. And we're going to be talking about how fathers can effectively communicate with their kids. But before we get there, if you haven't subscribed to the show, make sure you do so and tell someone else. But hit that notification bell so that you'll know whenever we upload a new show. And we'll have one just about every week. But ladies and gentlemen, I want you to welcome our guest today. And his name is Denny Denny Coates. And Denny is an author, and I talked about it before the show, but he's an author and he's written many books and done many articles about parenting and how we can be better parents and how we can communicate, which is so important. I think much more important than we realize how we communicate with our kids. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to welcome Denny Coates. And that's Dr. Denny Coates, to be exact. How you doing?
I'm doing great. And Mike, thanks for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show and giving us some information about, what it is to have a good communication with our kids. And I know, especially when kids are in their teenage years, when they seem to drop, listening, paying attention, want to pay attention, even want to hear our voice in some cases. It's nice to know how we can learn to communicate. But I guess with the first simple question is, why is learning how to communicate with your child so important?
Well, Mike, one way to look at it is if you're a parent, a dad, and you want to have an impact with your child, how are you going to do it? I just think it's practically impossible to do that without talking with your child, without communicating with your child. So you're right. It has a huge role. It's a huge factor in being an effective father.
Yeah, and it doesn't really matter whether you are talking to your son or your daughter. I know there's different dynamics and different words you will use. Because let me ask you, I heard at one point that when you want to communicate with your son, it's better to do it in the car while you are driving and he's sitting uh, in the passenger seat, and they tend to pay better attention. Is that true?
Well, I think that works for both daughters and sons.
Oh, okay.
Um, you know, finding the right time, the right mood, they're not always open to
Mhm.
wanting to talk with you. They're not always open to your guidance. I mean, you might be ready to tell them something, pass on some wisdom, or teach them something, but are they ready? So a lot of times, when it's just a natural moment, like
Mhm.
you're just out there having a good time, or maybe it's in the evening and everybody's relaxing and it's not a big stressful, just home from school kind of thing. Uh, those are the times when they're more ready to listen to you.
Okay. So how soon should a father start developing good communication with their child?
I think the truth is, when the child is starting to talk,
Okay.
I know a dad. In fact, he's an amazing dad, um, who talked with his daughter and his son the moment they were ready to talk,
Mhm.
and he talked with them on an adult level about adult things, and the result has been just amazing. The kids are brilliant.
So he
Um,
talked in an adult level.
yes,
So he didn't dummy it down any.
that's right. That was his approach, and I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. And would you say that even before their talk, like in infant stage, would you do the same thing?
Well, it wouldn't hurt. And of course, when they get older, it's crucial to talk to
Hmm.
them as adults, because
Yeah.
that's exactly what teenagers are. Starting from age about 10, 11, and so forth, you really do need to think of them not as little kids, but as adults in progress.
Yeah.
That's the whole point, is preparing them for adult life.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that because when you really sit down and look about it or think about it, even at 16, really at 18, they're going to be an adult. And if they're going off to college, they're going to be leaving home. So that's only 2 years.
That's right. It seems like a long time, for the human being to be prepared for being a fully grown, mature adult. It takes at least 18 years.
Hmm.
It's not like when a doe gives birth to a fawn, and so the little baby deer is ready to stand on its own 2 feet in the first 2 hours of life. It's not like that.
Yeah,
It's 18 years, and
yeah,
so that's a long time. But on the other hand, it's absolutely amazing how fast that goes by.
right, right. I must agree with that one. It's I can just remember when my kids were just babies, and it seemed like yesterday. And now they're in their 20s and 30s,
Yeah.
and it really kind of blows me away.
Well, the role of communication is important in one way, in that when they do become adults, my two sons are in their 50s.
Hmm.
They both have careers in IT.
You look like you're in
And we
your
have a
50s. What are you talking about?
thank you. That's nice to say. Um, so we have a great relationship. My boys and I, but it doesn't always turn out that way. And so
Hmm.
part of the goal of having these open channels of communication while they're still young is to grow that relationship and build the bond, instead of them wanting to distance themselves from you, or maybe there's rancor. Uh, it could happen.
Yeah.
And
And
sometimes it does. I mean, think about it: 18 years, or the period of adolescence, which is about 10 to 12 years. There are confrontations, there are arguments, there are
hmm.
conflicts, words that are said and cannot be taken back. A parent could lose it, and a kid could lose it, and the child might feel disrespected
Yeah.
and threatened, and that's bad. And so they would want to push away from you, and you don't want that.
Right. Well, What are the most psychological damaging things you can say to a child?
Well, one of the worst things is just calling them a name,
Yeah.
a put down, a put down. Or adults are really good at sarcasm. Like if you said, "Oh, that was smart," something like that.
Hmm.
Uh, but these a parent might a parent might say these things. A parent might do these things. Why? They don't want to. But what really happens is that when you do have these moments, they're very emotional, and they surprise and shock an adult sometimes. And there you are, and so you react. It's only human to react,
Yeah.
and so you do, and the hurt is done. It's and you might fall back on your authority, and no child appreciates that. So
Yeah. So
it can
would you
happen.
think? Yeah. So would you think that's something that happens from memory, from your childhood memory? Something that your parent may have said to you, and now you just inadvertently just blurt it out without thinking before you blurt it out.
Yeah, I remember one of the things my dad would blurt out when he was frustrated. He would say, "You quit that, or I'll knock you into next week."
I remember that one myself.
Oh yeah.
Oh
So
yeah.
I didn't use that, but it's true, Mike. I mean, you know what the problem is that their parents don't go to parenting school before they have kids.
Yeah. And the
They
kids
don't.
don't come with a guider's book either.
That's right. And we talk about how important communication is, but really what we're talking about are skills, communication skills to be effective in your communication. And parents don't get those before the kids are born either. I
Hmm.
mean, some do. Maybe a half of 1% of all the parents are lucky and they get effective communication training before the child is born, but most people don't. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, what'll happen is you'll react, and that's when the problem starts. And so, in my work, the key is to replace those reactions with uh, communication habits,
Hmm.
effective communication skills. And it takes time, it takes practice, as any skill does. Communicating involves skills, and each communication skill has elements. It's just like it's like playing golf or tennis or playing a musical instrument.
Hmm.
And so, if you want it to be automatic because it's the heat of the moment. And it's hard to say, "Wait a minute, I don't want to say that. I want to do this right." And so you say the effective thing, but that's hard.
Yeah.
What you want is the skill that allows you to react comfortably and automatically in the moment.
Is that something that you, like you said, with instruments or golf and what have you, you practice something that you prepare yourself for? So when it happens, you just don't blurt out the first thing that comes into your mind.
Well, the key is practice. And so, what are you going to practice? Well, that's why I wrote this book, Connect with Your Kid. It's not a traditional book that you read cover to cover. It's a book that addresses what I feel are the top 10 communication skills. I've been teaching adults communication skills for over 30 years, and so I'm aware of dozens and dozens of these communication skills. Um, but I think there are a few that have the highest impact for parents, and those are the ones that I treat in the book. The top 10 parent-child communication skills.
Okay.
So they are skills, and so you have to practice them. You have to get to the reps, as they say.
So what are some of the top 10, well, so we don't give away the whole book, what are some of the top five things that, somebody should really practice and learn?
Right. Well, I like making it easy for the parent. So I basically have said, start with this one skill, and it's listening to understand. It's listening.
Okay.
And if you start with that, what you learn is that listening is a component of the other 9 skills. So it's a
Hmm.
great way to start. Another good skill is one that parents don't hear much about, and that's asking the right questions. I really encourage parents to ask open-ended questions, the kind of questions that they can't answer in one word. They have to think and explain, and such as, uh, "Why do you think that way?" See, there's no one word
Hmm.
that they can answer. They have to think, okay, well, why do I think that way? And so now you've got a conversation going, and you learn more about your child. And so, in the book Connect with Your Kid, uh, I offered a couple of dozen of these open-ended questions uh, that a parent can ask,
Yeah.
and they tend to develop the child.
Because I know you mentioned listening is a one that's very important, and a lot of times you hear kids say, "Well, you never listen to me. You don't pay attention to what I'm saying."
That's right.
Is that what you're referring to?
That's exactly right. You want to avoid that impression by actually listening and actually understanding the skill. I can describe it briefly to you. The skill is, first of all, knowing that it's time to listen. It's time not to say anything. It's time
Hmm.
not to react. It's time to listen. And so you you focus your awareness on the child, and when you hear something from them, they're trying to express something, and they'll express it in words, and they'll express it in their nonverbals and in their emotion. What you need to do is to get the message. And when you think you've got some of it, some of what they're trying to say,
Hmm.
then you put it into your own words and you say something like, let me get this straight. You feel that blah, blah, blah. And the child will hear you say that. And if you nailed it, they'll say, yeah, yeah, mom. Yeah, dad, that's what I mean. Or if you missed it a little bit, they say no. And then they'll talk some more and try to get you to understand. But in the end, the impression is he understood. He got me. And that's a feeling that just is priceless.
Yeah.
And if you can make that happen more often than not, that's it's just magical.
Yeah, because it's not something that's going to happen all the time, but if you can do it majority of the time, is the
Yeah.
key. Because you
Uh-huh.
and your child, especially as they get older, which you're going to have times where you bump heads and you disagree on a subject, but if they know that you hear what they're saying and kind of grasp what they're saying, that's the key, right?
That's right. From it, just from the experience of having you listen to them over and over time, they will get this impression: Dad really cares what I think.
Mm.
He cares about me, and that is priceless. When you think about, if you don't do it, then the opposite impression might happen.
Yeah, and that's I think is really important. I know with raising my kids, I always try to talk to them. Really, I never did baby talk, never. So
Uh
I,
huh.
I agree with what you was saying about the other guy earlier, because that's something I never did. But what is the third thing that they should learn?
Well, another really important skill is learning how to give the kind of feedback that encourages a child to do better.
Hmm.
They're going to mess up many times. That's what growing up's all about: is making mistakes and doing dumb things and learning from it. Um, and so instead of reacting in a traditional way, which is to say something like, "Well, why did you do that?"
Hmm.
That makes the child feel inferior. oh, there must be some. Maybe he thinks I'm stupid or something.
Yeah.
Um, so instead of doing that or showing that you're angry at them, then I have a skill for giving feedback in a way that encourages. And the way you do that is to describe what they did, specifically describe what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And then just honestly tell them how you feel about it. Now, it might have been a good thing. You want to encourage even when they do good things.
Mm-hmm.
So you tell them how you feel about it. And if you want them to do something differently, or if you want them to keep on doing the good thing, then you say so. Here's what I'd love to see more of in the future.
Okay.
And then you express your support. I just want to be there for you. I know that you can do this. You're a good kid. See?
Yeah.
That's how you give feedback in a way that encourages instead of putting the kid down.
Because you don't want to hear, a parent shouldn't say that you mentioned earlier, you're stupid, you're dumb. And what about comparing a child to another child or to a cousin or relative or what have you?
I think it's a common mistake. Kids don't like that.
Okay.
They are who they are. And in the best case, they want to be their best self. But they're not the other kid. And they hate it when they're compared to other children.
I've heard that. And that's one reason I want to ask that question, because I've heard a lot. And I know parents do that a lot. We say, oh, if you would like your brother Billy, or
Yeah.
you would like your cousin Larry, or what have you.
Yeah.
Or I wish you were like your brother or your sister.
They hate that. And it doesn't work. It tends to push the kid away.
Now, I was watching a little news thing the other day, and they were talking about this guy that was a murderer. And he was even in court on his sentencing, and he was saying, hey, I'm no good. You need to kill me. You need to put me in jail. That's what I deserve. And I looked at my wife and I said, I have a sneaky feeling that's what he heard all his life. That he was no good, that he was lazy and stupid and he was bad. And he decided, yeah, okay, well, everybody thinks so. So everybody I care about thinks so. So let me just go ahead and perpetuate that.
It's how he grew up to see himself.
Yeah.
And we call that low self-esteem.
Right.
What you want is a child to learn that, hey, I'm worthy. I'm a good kid. And I've learned that by how my parents treat me and what they say about me. I know they love me. I know that they think that I have a lot of potential. And so you want them to grow up thinking that.
Okay.
If the other thing happens, then you've got that example you just gave.
Yeah. And that's sad. And I think in my mind, I think every kid really wants just to be loved and know that they're loved.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think love is the foundation.
Okay.
And all this other stuff about communication is something you build on the foundation. So you do want to do the work. You do want to exercise the best communication that you have, because you want them to stay open to your guidance.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want them to close themselves off or push themselves away from you. You have a lot to give as a father or a mother. You can teach them life skills.
Mm-hmm.
You can set a great example for being a good person. You can help them develop strong character. You can pass on wisdom. There's a lot you can and should do, but the kid has to be open to it.
True.
And so that's why I think this effective communication is so important.
Now, would you say that if you teach your kid effective communication, they'll learn from you, and they'll know, one, how to talk to you, and two, how to talk to somebody else.
That's a that's a great idea. It's sort of like the ultimate outcome. You not only learned how to communicate well, but now you're coaching your kid to do the same thing, and so they'll become an adult who has some of the skill, and so they're not starting at square zero.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can tell you that didn't become aware of communication skills until I was 32 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids were already at the dawn of puberty. And it was a revelation. I thought, wow, you mean there's a really good way to listen? I want to know more about that. Here I was 32, and my kids are already getting into their teen years. It was amazing. And so I've been fascinated, and I've studied communication ever since.
Mm-hmm. And I know I did a lot of sales, and when you said you don't ask them, you got to ask them open-end questions, because I
Yeah,
learned that in sales, you want to ask
right,
open-end questions, so they can't give you a yes or no. Do you want to buy this? No.
right.
And and they can walk away. So let me ask you now, when a father or a parent, for that matter, is talking to their child, should they stay calm and have a good calm demeanor?
Why? I just think that's absolutely great advice. Um,
Okay.
I mean, you can't help being upset sometimes,
True.
but part of the first step is to say to yourself, "It's time to listen," or "It's time for me to give encouraging feedback as opposed to reacting with anger,"
Mm-hmm.
or "It's time for us to try to resolve this conflict together, so that we're both satisfied." In other words, to calm down and not just argue, not just assert your authority, but to use a skill. One of the skills you've learned, one of the 10 skills for parents in the book.
Okay. So your book is mentioning how to learn these skills. So I want you to tell the audience a little bit more about the book and what they'll learn from the book, where they can buy the book, and why it's going to benefit them.
Yep. Well, the book is called Connect with Your Kid. It's available on Amazon. It's probably the best place to buy books. Um, Connect with Your Kid, Mastering the Top 10 Parent Child Communication Skills. And so it really does focus on the top 10. It begins with listening in chapter 4. But the book also explains how to learn a skill. There's more to it than just reading about it and saying, I get it. You're not done. You have to practice. What happens is your brain, with these experiences of using it, the brain will wire itself to automatically kick the skill in when you need it. But so it's kind of like hitting a fastball in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't think, "Oh, how am I going to swing this bat?" You don't do that. You've already practiced it thousands of times, and so you just do it. And that's the goal with a communication skill, is to make it automatic. So the book explains how to grow a skill, how to ingrain a skill, and then we have 10 chapters that address the skills one at a time. And so that's essentially the book. So it's a little non-traditional. It's not one of those books that you read from cover to cover necessarily, that are a fun read. It's more of a coaching reference.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever skill you're working on, you just go to that chapter and stay focused on that one chapter, and think of it as your coach. This is how you do it.
Yeah. So if there's something, that a particular piece that you need to learn and enhance your skills with, there's a chapter there, and you just go to that chapter and read how to do it.
Right. It's a step-by-step learning, and there are many tips in each chapter for doing the skill better. So yeah, that's how I recommend people use that book.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned something that I really want to dive into for a second. You mentioned you didn't really learn communication skills until you were about 32. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's right.
And you have evolved by learning ever since. And what I'm getting at is one reason I do this show, and one thing that I really want men to get out of this show is that you are still learning, you are still evolving, and there is nothing wrong with learning a new skill or another skill that's going to help you, your family, your kids, and the people that are also surrounding you, that it might be your inner circle. So I really like what you said about that.
Well, learning a skill, as I said, involves doing it a lot. The more you do it, the easier it gets. That's how any skill is. But along the way, it can be sometimes frustrating
Mm-hmm.
because you might forget to use the skill, or you might
True.
do it
Yeah.
awkwardly, or
Yeah.
you say, "Well, whoa, that didn't feel good." And Mike, what happens a lot of times is parents will give up on it, and that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
sad because you know if you're working on listening and it's not going well for you for a while and you give up, well, you're done, man,
Yeah.
because all you've
Or
got now are your old habits.
yeah.
So what I've done is I've written another book that sort of covers this. You need a coach.
Mm-hmm.
All the best musicians have coaches. All the best athletes have coaches, and I think parents need coaches too. And for most parents, it's really working with another parent. So it's like a dad coaching a dad, or dads coaching each other, or a spouse coaching each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've written this book called Parents Coaching Parents. As you can see, it's a very slim book, um, easy to read. And it's a coaching guide also,
Okay.
with lots of tips on how you can pair off with a parent that you trust, and just like every week or every couple of weeks, you just kind of get together and you review what you've been trying, and you encourage each other and support each other and set goals for the next meeting. And that's easy. It's any parent, any dad can be a coach to another parent.
Well, I personally think that we're all coaches because when
Yeah.
we're out in the public's eye or when we have friends over to the house, how you conduct yourself is something that you're teaching somebody else to do or not to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I always think we have to be conscious that we are always coaching, whether it's another man or another woman, a child, or what have you. But we're all posed to be and should be coaches.
Yep. I was thinking the other day of when I had my kids when they were young. I was kind of ignorant about parenting,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and yet they turned out well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I asked myself, well, what did I do right? I mean, I didn't know anything about parenting. What did I do right? And I guess I was just lucky that I um, thought, well, I just need to set a good example,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to spend time with them and talk to them, and I just did that. And it turns out that they raised themselves with a little bit of guidance from me, a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of wisdom here and there. But they're self-made men, and so it all turned out well in our family. But you're right. The setting an example to the children, and you will also, by the way, set examples for other adults.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Coates, that's our time for today. But before we go, do you ever uh, give out advice or you have people that can contact you?
I'm not a parent coach. I'm a parenting author, and I've written about 7 or 8 books for parents. That's how I do it. Plus, I have a blog that I update every week or so. It's on my website, which is drdennycoates.com, drdennycoates, all one word, .com.
Okay.
So people, I mean, they can contact me and ask me questions, and they often do, and I'll certainly reply. But
Okay.
I have a lot to say, and that's how I do it.
All right. Well, we'll have that information, your website information. It'll be on the screen so people can see it and they can get that information. So, because, my ultimate goal here is to make sure fathers get all the skills that they need when they need it and they know who to
Yeah.
contact or where to get it, most importantly. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the Father Show and providing your expertise on how we can communicate more effectively with our kids. I think that is a very, very key thing that a
Yeah.
parent has and should learn because it really can make or break your child.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's been a pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me.
my pleasure. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is our show for today. I want to thank you for joining us here on the Father Show, and I'm your host, Mike Thompson. And I really want to thank Dr. Denny Coates for being on the show and providing this expertise because this is important. You really need to know how to talk to your child because just saying anything that comes off the top of your head can really damage your child. And then you wondering why they turned out the way that they are. And I'm talking about, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. You don't mess them up when they get to 16, 17. You messing them up when they're infants. And so please learn the information and help somebody else. But if you haven't subscribed to our show, please do so. Go to the Father Show with Mike Thompson and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can get every episode that we have. And you can, if you don't have time to watch the show on YouTube or on our Facebook page, you can always catch the audio version of the show on iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Pandora, and Spotify and other apps that are out there. So while you're out walking around, playing golf, cutting the grass for that matter, you can listen to the show. So don't forget, tune in, and we'd love to have you. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.